The sponsors, Dr. Paul Koningsberg in memory of his brother, Dr. Sam Koningsberg, Shimon Reuven ben Labish, and Ed Goldberg's cousin Nissen Hara, Nissen ben Fardosa, Paula and Bob Robberg. In memory of their dear friend Julian Smith, Yehuda ben Yisrael, Malka Mann, in memory of her family murdered in the Holocaust, Harav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Many friends of Dr. Marvin Blush, Moshe Shalom ben Yitzchak Halevi, friends of Toby Paris, Sarah Tova bat Yisrael Dov, friends of Malka Levi, Malka bat Yosef, friends of Avi Gidler, Avramea ben Shimon, Shal Shur, her children, and grandchildren.
Put me up, Marvin.
In memory of her uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook, Yisrael ben Arav, Martha Federbush and family. Of her husband, Dr. Oriel Paul Federbush, Oriel ben Harav Shimon. A month of learning, sponsored by Haran and Mel Haller, in memory of her mother, Malka Rachel Bas Yehuda Leib. A week of learning, excuse me, sponsored by Gedalia and Phyllis Reese, in memory of her father, Harav Chaim Shraga Feivel. Also by Oscar and Shelley Mole, a week of learning, in memory of his father, Shlomo ben Yitzchak, and mother, Rachel Bas Naftali. Today, a day of learning plus Torah Fund, sponsored by Ruth Kostman, in memory of her father-in-law, Yitzchak ben.
Go in front of me, please.
I said you are not there. The camera's on this side, honey.
Lisa Paleyev,
You're not there.
day of learning in memory of her husband, Arav Yisrael ben Arav Moshe Aaron. And today, Jack and Sheila Prince, a day of learning in memory of his stepfather, Nachman ben Yitzchak HaKohen. May the Shemas have an Aliyah, Kranka Rafia, Velta Yeshua Shem Tzliah, and L'chol B'nai Yisrael, a good gebencht Yar.
Amen.
Okay. That is it for today. Right. Okay. Okay, I have to tell you that I found this morning's Gemara difficult.
Uh-oh.
Okay, and I'm going to sort of do a quick review a little bit, and I hope that those other guys will be getting on shortly. Okay. I don't even know if Zev made it yesterday as well. Harvey, you did, right?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, okay, good. Okay. So,
And you're going to use that again on the all the Sundays, it looks like?
what?
You're going to use that new,
Well, I'm going to erase it because hopefully we'll get the problem
okay.
resolved. Larry Fish called me back towards the end of our shiur and explained what he thinks it is, and I'll have to speak to the office about it. Okay. So I don't know if when you have a recurring meeting, which is what the classes are, okay, that apparently has to be registered with Zoom. Okay. And the question is, does it have to be, on what basis does it have to be done on a monthly basis? Like that. Okay, so that's what I have to clarify with them. Because really, in a sense, yesterday was the, so to speak, first year of the new month, right? So that was the issue. Okay, so I think that you'll remind me if I don't say anything tomorrow, then it meant I didn't connect with the office and get it resolved today. Okay. All right. We saw just a quick review, and then we'll move into our new material. All right. Hopefully the guys will get on. We saw that the Gemara was focused on a machloket as to whether the issue of chumutz nukshe or chumutz ta'arovet chumutz, okay, whether to what degree these were also, number one, were they equal to consumption of unadulterated chumutz? And the Gemara seemed to imply that was not necessarily the case. Okay. And number two, okay, why was that not the case? Okay. And we saw that the Mishnah gave us a number of examples of these items. I'm referring particularly a case in point to kutach. That's one of the easiest ones to remember in terms of an example of ta'arovet chametz,
Right.
where there is some real chametz in the mixture, but do you say the combination of something that's forbidden, namely the chametz, and something permitted, okay, why is that not chayav kores? And even if we say it's not chayav kores, it's a lesser prohibition because it's only a lav, okay, therefore, how does that carry over to other prohibitions of permitted and non-permitted when mixed in other places in the Torah? Okay. Then we saw the other example of cosmetics, which was chametz nuksha. It's inedible, okay, as the Art Scroll tried to suggest. Koren suggested a slightly different explanation, but that's adequate for our purposes right now. Okay. And as a result, there too, that was considered by some only a lav, over on a lav, and not chayiv koret. And the whole Gemara that we saw yesterday, that we sort of ran through, unfortunately, tried to bring this issue up. And it ended with a discussion of darshaning a phrase, okay? Kikol, right? That was the phrase, okay? Whether it was for all kinds of people, all kinds of foodstuffs, things like that. Did it include mixtures or not? Okay, things of that nature. Okay. So that's where, right, a lot of Sev morning. That's where a lot, I was just doing a quick review. Okay. A lot of the issue came. Chometz yukshe, tarovet chometz, are they considered part of koret? No, that was our sort of bottom line, that they don't seem to be chayav koret. Okay, particularly if we accept the view of Rabbi Eliezer, right, who was not darshaning ki kol, okay, as to indicating mixture, ta'arovet chometz was part of the prohibition. Now the prohibition, remember, is bal yoroi bal yamatzeh. Okay. Now the Gemara is going to go into a whole digression as we're going to start this morning. Okay, by pointing out, okay, we claimed that this issue, okay, could be applied to other prohibitions in the Torah. Right? So I want us to start this morning on Mem Gimel, Amud Beis. Actually, it's about 5 lines from the bottom of the Amud. Okay? Middle of the line. Rabbi Abahu, Amar Rabbi Abahu, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. That's the place where we're going to pick up, right? Because we said the Gemara there is making a digression, and it's going to try to carry over what it was referring to before, because we had the example of what we said was ta'arovet chametz, where there was a mixture of a forbidden item and a permitted item, and yet we said that's only a lav. Okay. Now, Amar Rabbi Abahu, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Kol isurin shebetorah, all examples of prohibitions in the Torah, ein heter mitzaref leisur. He's citing Rabbi Yochanan, a permitted item when joined with a forbidden item. Chutz me'isurei nazir, with the exception of those examples that apply to a Nazirite. Okay? But in those cases, we would say they don't join together. In other words, they don't result in the required minimum shiur to make the person chayav.
Right.
Okay? With the exception of the example of a Nazirite. And the example we could give is, let's say a Nazir takes bread and he soaks it in wine. Okay? What is the situation there? Is he chayav? Because the bread is heter, the wine is isur. The combination, therefore, is exactly the parallel to what we have before with tarovet chametz. And there we said it was only going to be a lav and chayav malchus, but certainly not karet. Okay? So what makes us say that, number one, Nazariteship is the only exception? Okay? So the Gemara tells us, Shaharei Amra Torah Misrat. In other words, that the Torah uses specifically the language of soaking, combining, things like that, with regards to the example of the Nazir. So that may be why Rabbi Yochanan gives that as the only exception. However, along comes Ze'iri. The Ze'iri Amar, Af Sa'or Bal Taktiru. Okay, Ze'iri's statement that flour, okay, also cannot be offered on the altar, implying that in regards to leaven mixture, it also is going to be included in the prohibition. Keman, asks the Gemara, Ke Rabbi Eliezer. Why? The Darish Kol, because he expounds the word all, as in we saw Kol Machmetzet. Right? Ihachi, says the Gemara, as we go over now to Mem Daled, today's daf, right? If that's the case, the Inyan Chametz B'Pesach Nami, also in regards to the example of, right, Chametz on Pesach. And the Gemara continues, Ein Hachinami. Yes, indeed, that seems to be the case. Okay, and why did Ze'iri say that? Ula afuke mida Abaye, in order to exclude the view of Abaye. Da'amar, who says, Yesh haktara lepachot mikazayas, that there is an acceptable offering, burning on the altar of something that's less than a kazayas. Okay? In other words, if it's less than an olive, all right, that item on as part of an offering, one would not get lashes. Okay? Kamash Malan comes to teach us the haktara lav lefachot mikazayat. And therefore Ze'iri's statement is coming to tell us that in terms of offering, burning something on the altar, it can never be less than the size of a kazayas. Now, what happens? Yativ Rav Dimi v'ka'amar la lahashma'ata. Rav Dimi was sitting and he was repeating, he was learning this lesson. As a result, Amar le Abai le Rav Dimi. Rav Abai challenges Rav Dimi, we're going to see in a second. V'kol isurin shebetorah, we're saying that all prohibited elements in the Torah, ein heter mitzaref le'isur, is it really that the permitted item doesn't join with the forbidden item to result in the one being liable with a minimum shiur? Vahatnan. But aren't we taught elsewhere, okay, in the following Mishnah? Hamekafeh shel truma. If we have a soup or a porridge, which is primarily made of grain, and that grain is truma grain, and in addition to that grain, v'hashum v'hashemen shel chulin, there is garlic and oil that is unconsecrated. Okay, so we have three items in this porridge or soup. And remember, since the grain itself is truma grain, what happens? It's a level of sanctity. V'naga tvul yom b'miktzatan. And somebody who is a tvul yom, okay, who is immersed that morning, but in the result is really not tahor till evening time, touched that soup or porridge, pasal et kulan. Okay? He has rendered the entire mixture, okay, entire stew, however we want to call it, okay, porridge, null and void. The Mishnah continues, Hamikafeh shel chulin, but if the same kind of porridge or soup, okay, with pieces of grain, right, wheat, whatever, barley, that are chulin, v'hashum v'hashemen shel truma, and the shum, the onion, the garlic, whatever, and the oil are truma, are consecrated, v'nagat tvul yom b'miktzatan, and still a tvul yom is the one who touched it. Lo pasal elamakom magao bilvad, that he only renders the item that he touched as invalid. Now, this seems to be somewhat contradictory. And so the Mishnah continued, or the Braita continued, Vahavinen ba. And when we discuss this, what did we therefore say? Magkom magao amai psula, the place where he touched. Okay, in regards to the later part of the statement. Why is that the only part that's invalid? Okay. Ha, bit leila ho tavlin berov. But here, wouldn't we say that this shum and shemen, right, this garlic or whatever, okay, wouldn't that be mavatel? Wouldn't that be nullified as spices within the entire mixture of the soup, the porridge? Va'amar Rava bar Barchana. And Rava bar Barchana comes to tell us, Ma ta'am ho'il v'zar lo ke'alehen b'kzayit hechidami. Where here, he says, because of the taste, a non-Kohen, right, would get Malchus by having only a kazayas of this porridge. That would seem to tell us, to support Rabbi Zeiri's statement that something that's forbidden mixed with something permitted, okay, beyond just Nazaretship, as Rabbi Yochanan said, is liable, is chayav. Hechidami, how is that possible? Lav mishum deheter mitzaref leisur. Isn't it a case here where we have something permitted joining something that's forbidden? Now, I'm sorry I'm going a little bit on the slower side, but I just find it a little more direct. No, he says. My kzayit, de'ika kzayit, bichdei achilat pras. No, he says, when we talks about eating a measure of an olive, it has to be eating a full olive's measure in the amount of time that it would be to eat half a loaf. Ukazayit, bichdei achilat pras, deoraitahi. And don't we say that eating a olive's measure in the amount of time, okay, of eating half a loaf is a Torah measurement. In other words, it's Torah mandated. And therefore we have to be machmir. Amar le'en. Yes, he says. En hachina. Ihachi, I'm sorry. If that's the case, amai plige rabbanan alei de Rabbi Eliezer bekuta chabavli. If that's the case, then why did the rabbis before disagree with Rabbi Eliezer in regards to Babylonian kutach? Clearly, it's an example of Isur and Heter being combined. And clearly, if he's eating this kutach, he's going to ingest a kazayas worth of the breadcrumbs that are in it, and shouldn't therefore be machmir and say he's liable. Elamai mishum deheter mitzaref leisur. But here, isn't it not that we're talking about something permitted that's joined with something forbidden? Sof, amai plige rabbanan alei de Rabbi Eliezer bekuta chabavli. That's what we just said, right? Ella, rather, hanach lekuta chabavli. He says, put aside the example of Babylonian kutach for a moment. Delete be kazayit bichdei achilat pras. Because it's possible that the amount of breadcrumbs or bread pieces that are in there would not be equivalent to a measure of a olive being eaten in the time frame of a half a loaf. If you're going to say, however, that the person eats pure original kutach, for example, the kasharif, the ka'achile, that he sort of gulps it down and eats it that way, okay? That maybe that way he might satisfy the olive measurement within the time frame of achilat pras. They argue, by the way, that that's 3 to 9 minutes. Batla da'ate eitzel kol adam. Okay, that idea is removed, is aside from most people, because most people see kutach as a dip, and it's too strong to be eaten on its own directly. Ve'i mishater, and if he certainly dips it, kishater va'achil, and he dips it and eats it, Lit be kazayit b'chdei achilat pras. Okay, then there is no eating the equivalent of an olive amount in the time period of a half a loaf. Now, Gemara is going to see Abaye challenging him, Rabba bar Chana, okay, in this case. First challenge, Etive. I'll challenge you, says Abaye, with the following. Shtei kederot, 2 large pots. Echad shel chulin ve'echad shel truma. One has chulin in it, one has truma in it. V'lifnehem shtei meduchot. And in front of them are 2 mortars for grinding, right? For pounding spices. Echad shel chulin ve'echad shel truma. One has spices that are truma, one has spices that are chulin. V'naflu elu l'toch elu. And this one fell into this one, and this one fell into this one. Mutarim. We say they're permitted. Why? She'ani omer truma letoch truma nafla, v'chulin letoch chulin nafla. Because I can say, okay, in this idea, that we have the chulin falling into chulin, the truma falling into truma, and I'm being lenient, right? Why? We're going to see in a second. V'i amrat kezayet b'chdei achilat pras d'oraita. And if you're going to say that the requirement of eating a olive's measurement in the time frame of half a loaf, amai amrinan sha'ani omer truma l'tochuli. Why can then one say and be lenient, saying that I can say that the truma fell into the truma, chulin into chulin? Okay. In other words, it must mean that achilat, kazayas achilat pras is rabbanan and not deoraita. And by saying it's the rabbanan, we can be lekula. And that's what gives us the opportunity to say, this one went into this one went into the same variety. So, Gemara now, Rabba bar Chana is going to respond. Amarle, he said to him, Hinach l'truma t'tavlin d'Rabbanan. Put aside the example of truma regarding spices. That's only the Rabbanan. So that's why we can say, you can argue ani amarti. So Abaye now comes and tries to bring a second proof. Etive. I'll challenge you again with the following braita. Shtei kupot. I have 2 boxes or 2 large baskets. Echad shel chulin ve'echad shel truma. One contains chulin, unconsecrated. One contains truma, right? V'lifneihem shtei sa'im. And in front of them are 2 small containers, each of a seah, okay, of produce, grain. Echad shel chulin, echad shel truma. One is consecrated flour or grain. One is non-consecrated. V'naflu elu l'toch elu. And the small container, the seah's worth of flour or produce, fell into one of the baskets or boxes. Right? Again, right? Mutarin, it's permitted. Sha'ani omer chulin l'toch chulin naflu, truma l'toch truma nafla. That again, the same item fell into the same variety. V'i amrat kezayet b'chdei achilat pras deoraita. And if you're going to again say, okay, that the measurement of a olive's amount in the course of eating a half loaf is Torah mandated, right? If that's our argument, right? Amay amrinan sha'ani omer. Then why can I say again that I can claim they fell into the same? Again, proving that that's going to be derabanan. Amarle. So he answers him. So again, Rabbi Bar Bar Chana responding again to Abaye. Hanach letruma bizman hazeh derabanan. Put aside the example of truma, because if we're talking about nowadays, okay, what is it? It's only derabanan. And since it's derabanan, again, we can decide the kula. And as a result, we can say ani amarti, etc. So now the Gemara picks up. Remember, this was all based on Ze'iri's argument that you could apply the same idea of Isur mitzdaref to heter to chametz, to grain. Okay? But Rabbi Yochanan, remember, said it only applied to the example of the Nazir, based specifically on the pasuk, right? Because he cited the words misrat. So Gemara comes back. V'hai misrat lahachi hu da'ata. And this comparison of misrat, is this what it comes for? Hai mibaile likadatanya. It comes specifically for where it teaches misrat. Okay, this combination, this soaking. Okay, yes, right. Let's go over to the next Amud. Litain ta'am ki ikar. No, it doesn't come to talk about mixtures. It comes to teach us a different lesson, namely that the taste of something is like the equal to the essence of the substance. Okay? She'im sara anavim b'mayim v'yesh bahem ta'am yayin, because we're a Nazareth to soak grapes in water, and then that water to have the taste of wine, chayav, the Nazareth would be liable. Now, the Gemara picks up. Mikan atadan lechol haTorah kula. From here, then, you can use that example to apply it to other cases of throughout the Torah as well, and say as follows. So he's going to try, of course, to do a kal v'chomer. Uma nazir she'ein isuro isur olam. Whereas in regards to a Nazareth, okay, his prohibition is not a long-term, I'm going to say, prohibition, right? It only applies for the time period of his Nazarethship. Ve'ein isuro isur hana'ah. And his prohibition does not prohibit benefit. Second aspect. And the third, v'yesh heter le'isuro. Not only that, but there is an exemption, I'm going to use that phrase, for his prohibition. He can get out of his Nazareth vow by going to a chacham, okay, or to a panel, to a beis din. Asabo tam ki ikar, and we say that we can learn, therefore, the principle of tam ki ikar, that the taste is like the substance. Kilayim, if we take an example of forbidden mixtures, okay, let's take as an example shatnez, okay, would be a good example. Linen and wool together is forbidden mixtures elsewhere in the Torah. She'isuro isur olam, where its prohibition is a long-standing, ongoing prohibition. V'isuro isur hana'ah, and its prohibition is a prohibition of benefit. Ve'en heter le'isuro, and there is no permission, exemption, okay, for his vow, for this prohibition. Eino din, is it not logical that we can then make the kal v'chomer and say sheyaset ta'am ki ikar, that therefore apply the idea, the principle of tam ki ikar, that the taste is like the substance itself. Vahu din la orla. And this is also applying not just to klayim, but even to the example of orla, bishtayim, with regards to at least two of the three aspects that we said, right? Because orla, on the one hand, it's not an isur olam. We admit that, right? Because after a certain number of years, the produce is no longer considered orla. But nevertheless, okay, it's still a prohibition of benefit, and it's a prohibition that cannot be exempted, cannot be lifted. Okay. Ha'mani, according to whom is this? Rabbananhi. It's the view of the rabbis. The Rabbi Yochanan, the Amar ka Rabbi Akiva. But we might say, on the other hand, that Rabbi Yochanan, who said it only applied to Nazirship, holds like Rabbi Akiva, that it may not apply to other Isurim in the Torah.
Rabbi Green, is it true you cannot give orla to a goy?
I'm not sure offhand, Zev. Okay, I would think that if you can't benefit from it, right, that may be the case. So Gemara now says, if you're saying that Rabbi Yochanan follows the view of Rabbi Akiva, which statement of Rabbi Akiva is it that tells us this message? Okay. Hey, Rabbi Akiva. Right? Which statement of Rabbi Akiva? Ilema Rabbi Akiva demat nitin. If it's the Rabbi Akiva statement found in the Mishnah that teaches as follows. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Rabbi Akiva says, Nazir sheshara pito biyayin, a Nazirite that soaks his bread in wine, v'yesh bo litzaref kadei kazayit, and he, right, wants to join it so that the amount is the value, the measure of an olive, chayav, he's liable. Umimai mipat umiyayin, and is it because of the combining of bread and wine? Dilma miyayin lechude. Perhaps it's only because of the wine by itself that the Nazir in that situation is chayav. And if that's the case, v'chi tema, if you want to say miyayin lechude, that it's the wine only by itself, ma'ila memra, what is it possible to say? Ha kamash malan, here it comes to teach us, the afal gav de ta'arovet, that even though it's a mixture, in this case of wine and bread, okay, it doesn't teach us the prohibition of regarding the mixtures. Ela Rabbi, okay, it only could teach us the prohibition of tam ki ikar. Okay? That again, that the taste of the bread, because it's so infused with the wine, that's what it can tell us is the isur. And that isur might apply throughout combinations in the Torah, and not our example of simply mixtures. So let's try, says the Gemara, to come up with another text of Rabbi Akiva's that we could argue that Rabbi Yochanan would identify with and hold. How about the following, says the Gemara. Ela Rabbi Akiva de Braita, but Rabbi Akiva's statement regarding a Braita, Tanya, as taught in the following Braita. Rabbi Akiva Omer says, Nazir sheshara pito biyayin, a Nazirite that soaked his bread in wine, Va'achal kezayit mipat, and he ate a olive's measurement of the bread, okay? Umiyayin, and also from the wine. Chayav, says the Braita, he is liable. Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva is here. Tam ki ikar minale. If he's going to hold that is an example, that Braita, of showing where various heter and asur items combine and therefore produce a mixture that's forbidden. If that's the case, then my other question would be, then on what basis can we say that Rabbi Akiva holds tam ki ikar? Okay, notice the Gemara, by the way, is making an assumption here that Rabbi Akiva does hold that view, even though we haven't had a source to prove it. Okay? So the Gemara is saying, Rabbi Akiva, tam ki ikar minale. Where, on what basis does he hold it? So the Gemara tells us, Yalif mi basar b'chalav. He learns it from the combination of meat with milk. And the Gemara says, Lav tama ba'almahu ba'asur. Okay, but that's a general reasoning, and that's forbidden. Hachanami lo shana, says the Gemara. But here too, maybe there's no difference. Okay, that each item by itself is initially permitted, but it's the combination of the two that results in the Isur. Hold on and we'll see if that's the case. That's where maybe if Rabbi Akiva learned combination prohibition, mixture prohibition from his other example, so maybe he's learning tam ki ikar from the combination of basar b'challah. However, the Gemara comes and tells us, right, the following: v'Rabbanan, and as far as the rabbis go, mi basar b'chalav lo gamrinan, the rabbis don't learn tam ki ikar from the example of milk, meat and milk, the chidushu, because that's a novelty. We don't learn additional halachas from novel situations. Umay chidush, why would the rabbis hold that this is such a novel concept? Ilema dahai lechude v'hai lechude shari. If we're going to say that this by itself is permitted, and this by itself is permitted, ubahade hadade asur, and when they're combined, that's when they're forbidden. Klayam nami, then other kinds of combinations, I'm going to say, mixtures, are also hai lechude v'hai lechude share. This one by itself is permitted. This one by itself is permitted. Ubahadade asur. And when they're combined, it's forbidden. Now, we could use the example that I used before of shatnez, right? Or we could use the normal example of klayim, of two kinds of seeds, okay? Each is permitted to be planted, but it's when they're planted together in the same area, that's when they're forbidden. Ela de'i taru le kulioma. But rather, says the Gemara, let's say that he takes the meat and he soaks it an entire day in milk, right? Taru le kuliyoma bechalva. Shari, that would be permitted. Bashele beshule. But if he cooks the two of them together, asur. That's where it's forbidden. The Rabbi Akiva, And as far as Rabbi Akiva goes, Nami basar b'chalav vadai chidushu. He must also, therefore, consider this issue of basar b'chalav also a novel idea. Ela yalif migu'ulei nachri. But maybe if that's the case, okay, he can't learn tam ki'ikar from basar b'chalav. Maybe he has to learn tam ki'ikar from a different example in the Torah. And what example are we going to take? We're going to take the example that we find in Bamidbar in the story of the Midianite utensils. And we're going to see it here in a second. Ela yalif migeulei nachrim. But rather we're going to take it from the example of purging Gentile utensils. Geilu nachrim lav tama ba'alma hu ba'asur. Okay, Gentile utensils have, if they don't have this general taste, right, then would they wouldn't be forbidden. Hachanami lo shana. Here too, maybe there's no difference. The Rabbanan and the rabbis, giulei nachrim, in regards to the purging of Gentile vessels, nami chidushu. That's also a unique, novel idea. Daha, because here, kol notain tam lifgam. We can say that if the taste is so severe in the utensil that it renders it a negative taste, mutar, then the item cooked in it is permitted. De gamrinen mindevela, because we can learn that from the example of nevela, of corpse, right? Meat. Bahacha asur. And here that's forbidden. So Gemara now says to us, Rabbi Akiva, maybe our example of Rabbi Akiva's learning, okay, tam ki ikar, comes from a different example then. Rabbi Akiva, kiderav chia berei Rav Huna. Okay, is like Rav Chia berei Rav Huna, the Amar who says as follows, Lo asra Torah ela b'kedera bat yoma, that the Torah only forbade it in a pot that was where items were cooked within a single day. Hilkach lav notain tam lifgam. Therefore, it's not a question of it providing a deleterious and negative taste. Okay? For Rabbanan, and as far as the rabbis are concerned, Kedera bat yoma, a pot in which items have been cooked within the same day, within 24 hours, nami lo efshar de lo pagma porta. It's not possible that it won't have at least some deleterious, some negative taste remaining. So, Amar le Rav Acha berei de Rav Avia, says as follows the Rav Ashi, okay, a new statement. Mi de Rabbanan nishma le Rabbi Akiva. From the view of the rabbis, we can therefore understand and learn the view of Rabbi Akiva. Mi lo amar Rabbanan misrat. Did not the rabbis hold like Rabbi Yochanan, or the example of misrat, specifically where the Torah says joining, combining these things, litain tam ki ikar, okay, in order to teach us that this is where the taste is similar to the real substance of the item itself. Mikan atad dan lekol isurim shebetorah. From here, we can therefore judge and learn, in other words, a kal v'chomer, for all the other prohibitions in the Torah. The Rabbi Akiva, nami misrat, for Rabbi Akiva then, We also have this idea of combining, joining. Okay, right? Laheter mitztaref leisur, where something permitted, okay, joins with something forbidden. Mikan atadan lekol ha'isurim shebetura kola. And here then we learn regarding all the other items where there are prohibitions in the Torah in its entirety. Okay. Now, when we continue tomorrow on top of Mem Hey, we're going to see, is that really the case? Okay. Or do they still continue to argue that the Nazaretship is a unique situation and we can't apply it, okay, in other cases, right? That's where we're going to pick up tomorrow from the bottom of Mem Dalet Amud Beis, the top of Mem Hey Amud Aleph. Okay, guys? Everybody stay well. If you're planning to try to get vaccinated tomorrow,